The truth is, the government isn't imposing anything because people have got off those planes from Spain. They've gone in taxis, they've gone on tubes, they haven't been tested, they haven't been asked where they're going to go and live and stay for 2 weeks. They haven't been tagged in the way they are in some other countries. It is a total free-for-all.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem we saw at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in the UK, is that the government were asking people to stay at home if they had symptoms or if they'd been in contact with people with symptoms, but there was no financial incentive to do that because sick pay at that stage, right at the beginning, didn't, for example, extend to self-isolating people. It now does, but it doesn't extend to people coming back and quarantining. So, I do think there's a balance. If you really need people to comply with these laws and these rules, then expecting them to do it at huge financial loss, which could be the difference between keeping your job and not keeping your job, is a massive ask of people. And you need to think about what structure you can put in place to potentially help people who you want to comply.
What would you say to somebody if their boss says to them, get your rear end back in work now, quarantining, it's not happening? What can they say back to them?
It's really difficult. I mean, under the law, that person shouldn't be required to go in. And if that person, for example, says, no, I'm not coming, they may have certain rights under, for example, whistleblowing legislation, because they'll have been effectively reporting to the employer breach of the quarantine rules. But I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with employees in that position because enforcing that right is really difficult. And, it's all very well an employment lawyer saying to someone, you've got the right not to be unfairly dismissed or the right, not to be disciplined in these circumstances. But if that person is disciplined and is dismissed, their remedy is to go to potentially an employment tribunal. That takes 1 to 2 years to get a remedy. It's just not realistic for most people. And so that's why I think the government really have to do more than just saying to the employers, please be flexible, because I just don't think it's enough to make people comply with the rules.
And if they don't, I am absolutely convinced that barely anyone is going to come back from Spain and quarantine. I think people are just going to carry on with their lives. And if they can quarantine, if they do quarantine, it's because it's easy. It's because they just can. It's easy. It's staying at home and carrying on working or not working or whatever. Isn't the reality that it reveals yet another open door in our COVID defence?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the other thing that I have heard anecdotally is that people really feel that why should I quarantine when I've come back from Spain, when I have, for example, been on one of the Balearic Islands where I understand the infection rate is not that high. When they look out into London or other areas of England where densely populated parts of the country, and they think, but we're being encouraged to go to the pub and we're being encouraged to go to restaurants.
4,000 new cases a week in England.
Yeah. So I can understand the frustration of travellers coming back thinking, why should I take the hit when actually the UK is encouraging people to, engage in being more sociable and going out and come into contact with other people.
I mean, I know there's insecure work, clearly, and your rights and your security is less in that situation. But if you have a staff job somewhere and somebody tells you you'll be sacked if you quarantine for 2 weeks, is the law strong enough for you to be able to say on the radio right now, no, you won't. It'll be fine.
I can't say you won't be sacked because I think that's the big problem is that you might be. But I think if that person has more than 2 years service, which means they have protection from being unfairly dismissed, then I would say it's very unlikely that an employer would be acting reasonably if they sacked someone for that reason.
And if you took them to a tribunal, would you have to pay for it yourself, in which case nobody's going to do it?
You would. I mean, in theory, you should be able to go to tribunal without legal help, but the practice is that it can be difficult to do that. So, that's it. You might have the right and you might be able to say, well, I've been unfairly dismissed, and a tribunal might agree with you, but getting there is an entirely different proposition.